Thank you very much. When you think of circus, if you ever think of circus, you may think of a tent or a theater. Who has seen a circus of any size in a tent or a theater? Oh, let me come back in now. I can make some assumptions here. Okay. My circus people. Circus happens a lot of other places. Happens in the streets, happens in hospitals, happens in refugee camps, it happens in evacuation centers from fires and floods. Circus is portable, especially clowning. And sometimes, if you're one of those clowns and you're in a strange land, it can get quite surreal. And that's where I want to start today. Read the opening chapter. This is the getting the glasses moment. There we go. And then the book. Opening chapter from a new book I have, The Snow Clown. I have copies without the Post-its available. So I think all I need to tell you is that this is a book of fiction that comes from a time in my life quite a while ago when I was booked by the Alaska Arts Council to do performances and teach and put together shows with students in the school in Yupik Eskimo villages in the southwest part of Alaska. That's a little surreal for someone from Berkeley. I think that's all. I'll just get started with chapter 1. It's called The Frozen River. Take it, clown boy. You can fly this crate until we get to the Kuskokwim. The bush pilot lets go of her steering wheel, or what would be a steering wheel if we were in a car. I grab mine, pulling back a little too hard, and the Cessna swoops up sharply. Easy, clown boy. Just keep us here at 500 feet and follow the shoreline. The Bering Sea, frozen thick, is almost indistinguishable from the tundra. Only ripples on the ice, solid waves, give me a hint of where the shoreline will be in the spring after breakup. It's February, the dead of winter. The only time the Alaska Arts Council brings performers up from the lower 48. It's the time of year where everyone is grouchy, bored with sub-zero weather and frozen salmon dinners, and ready for a couple of clowns to fly in with 21 bags full of juggling balls, costumes, stilts, face paint, a unicycle, and peacock feathers for balancing. Our job is to bring some circus light and warmth to the frozen tundra. I grip the handles, trying to keep the plane above the last line of frozen waves, peeking at the instruments every few seconds. Jenny, the pilot, leans back, folds her arms behind her head, and closes her eyes. I grip a little tighter. Jenny looks like Xena, warrior princess, and talks like Dolly Parton. She's our regular pilot and has been teaching me how to fly a plane since we started this tour, but I thought she was just filling the time and maybe flirting a little. Now she's napping, and I'm in control of a Cessna going 150 miles an hour over a frozen wasteland. We finally get the plane landed. We skid to a stop. The propeller slows enough to see the individual blades. I unbuckle and Jenny says, "Don't step out till I tether the prop." I had a guy once got out too early on a river like this. Ice was slick, the wind was up, slid right into the blades, hamburger ugly. I sit very still. Jenny gives us thumbs up through the windshield. Tina, my clown partner, and I pull on our coats, hats, mittens, and step out on the ice to start to unload. We've gotten used to 20 below. Sort of. The last two pieces come out of the plane. They're bundles of brightly painted wooden stilts, 7 feet long 2x2s with rectangular platforms for the kids' feet. They're tied together with their ends wrapped in burlap. As we lean the stilts on our pile of duffels, heavy-duty garment bags, suitcases, and canvas sacks, Jenny waves, jumps in the plane, starts the prop. A few minutes later, she's a spot in the distance. It's quiet. Tina and I stand on the frozen lit river looking out at a world of white. And I'll stop right there. Thank you. I could hold on to the book, but if I walk over there, you'll applaud, and we got that all worked out. I'm going to make an assumption, but I want to check this assumption like I checked the circus assumption, that most people in this room, maybe all of you, have found yourself a stranger in a strange land at some point in your life, and it may be a different country, but it could be that you just turn down Heron Street and suddenly find yourself in a different land. Strange lands happen anywhere. Just raise your hand if that rings for you. And yeah, okay, that was an assumption I made. Whatever the film's running in my head when someone starts talking gets taken sideways, and I think that's part of the idea. I want to share another piece. You don't have to applaud on this one. It's when I walk back. I want to share another piece here that we get to what the art is. Because there's two things that are happening. It's the place and what's going on. The military escort, the fact that it's 20 below and I'm on a frozen river and not sure what happens next, but knowing that if I stand here for too long, it's not going to go well. There's also the art part. And so I'm going to read about the first show in an Alaskan village. And I think all you need to know is that the two clowns have arrived on a Sunday. They sleep in the gym, and then they teach the kids all day and then do a show on the Monday night. Our first village, Akiachuk, welcomed us with the now standard swarm of kids, followed by a wonderfully unstandard salmon dinner at the home of one of the teachers. Delicious food, but awkward conversations about the struggles between Mormon missionaries, our hosts, and those Moravians who are trying to steal Eskimo souls away from the true path. Apparently, every white person in the village is here on a mission. Most of Akiachuk comes to see us Monday night, a few hundred folks sitting in the bleachers and on the gym floor to watch our clown show. In the part where Tina chases me into the audience, I hid by sitting in the lap of an old woman dressed in a kuspuk, a traditional Eskimo dress made of colorful gingham fabric and finished with lots of rickrack. The old woman grabbed my ass hard and said something in Yupik that got the biggest laugh of the evening. As I tried to get back on stage, every old lady in the row copped a feel. We get a long ovation that turned into synchronized clapping that got faster and faster. We exited behind the wrestling mats we'd upended to make a backdrop, gave each other a high five, and started to pack our equipment. It got very quiet. We peeked out to see the whole crowd sitting patiently, staring at our empty makeshift stage. We took another bow, just scattered applause, exited again. No one moved. Tina grabbed her concertina, threw me 3 balls, and said, "You juggle, I'll play." We did a quick encore, got some more applause, but no one got up to go. We invited the kids on stage, gave them scarves so they could show off the juggling they'd learned in class. Then we walked through the audience shaking hands. No one left. Finally, we sang another song, waved goodbye, and went backstage. Eventually, folks started trickling out of the gym. We found out later that Eskimo dancing is very popular in this area, and the traditional way for an audience to reward a good dancer is by clapping in rhythm until they do the whole dance again, only faster. Superstar Eskimo dancers sometimes do a dozen encores, ending in a frenzied sweat. We clearly didn't get the message. When I wrote that, I did not realize something that a person in an audience like you are right now pointed out to me, and you made me noticing this more than I did at the time, which is that's a really core cultural misunderstanding. As a professional performer of over 40 years, I know how a show ends. We do that little bow thing. If they're really going, we do a second one, and we exit. Everybody gets up, puts their coats on, and leave. As a resident of Akiachuk, everyone knows how a show ends. If it's no good, you just go thank you and you're done. But this one was good. You clap and they leave. And then they come out and do something else, slow. That basic misunderstanding of something that we both, that is, my partner Tina and I, and the audience knew and had no frame of reference that it could be any different, sets the stage for a series of other, perhaps gnarlier misunderstandings. I want to get into those, but first I want to invite you to do something, just wherever you are. Would you turn to the person or people around you, maybe two or three, and have a quick discussion about any moment that any of you have had where it goes beyond the, whoa, this is surreal, and it gets to the, we're really not understanding each other. This has just happened. Raise your hand if that makes enough sense to move forward. Okay, if that's half of you, then the other half will help you make sense. Good. I'm only going to give you about a minute and a half. We've got a short time together, but have that conversation. When have you been in that situation where it just goes by? And again, it could have been this morning as you're walking here. It could have been last night. It could have been 20 years ago. It could have been 1,000 miles away or next door. Any of those places. Go ahead, have that conversation. I feel bad interrupting, but I can drop in the seed that if you started a really good conversation, you have ways of continuing it a little later. You've also just answered a question that I ask myself often, which is, what do you do when you have that kind of miss? And is it better to avoid that moment or to welcome that as part of life in a world where there's difference? You could choose to live in a world where there isn't difference, and that's a legitimate choice, perhaps. But if you choose to live in a world where there's difference, and if you're an artist, sometimes the only way you pay the rent is to live in that world. People have asked me, why did you go to Alaska? Like, did you love the cold? No. I lived in the Mission. I liked to eat. The Alaska Arts Council had a lot of money. We had Reagan as a governor. You knew he was a governor, right? Here. And he had cut all the funding. So the California Arts Council was little. Alaska Arts Council was huge. And they didn't have many people. Whew. Loved it. But then you end up there and you go, oh, okay. It's cold here. So you just did one of the answers, which is storytelling. Telling people your story. I know you differently. I don't even remember your name at the moment, and yet I can see you with that tree and the wonder. So now we have something different that goes beyond the National Geographic view. And the other, I won't be coy about the other idea, I think, is humility. And I'll tell you, this is a meta story. When I was working on this book, who's a writer here? So you may do this too. I have first readers because right when you write it, and then I get a little possessive, and then I send it out, and I try to send it to people who might know something and who'll be kind to me. So my girlfriend, when I was in high school, is now the dean in an English department back east. And I was about to send this to the printer, and I got really scared. I sent her a note. I said, "Ooh, Sophia, please. I don't mind if the lead character, that fictional guy, is a little offensive sometimes and kind of clueless. That makes for good writing. But I don't want anyone to think that the author is." To be clear. And she sent me back the perfect sentence. "That's funny. I thought whenever you cross cultures, being offensive and clumsy is what happens." Sophia Burr is the one who did that. I just love that. It allowed me to send it to the printer. So this idea of humility going, yep, oh boy, a little bit of I'm sorry, and then trying to learn goes a long way. Let's take a look at stories part. The subtitle of The Snow Clown is Cartwheels on Borders from Alaska to Nebraska. And a few people said, oh, you just went there because it rhymed. No, I went there because there was work. Again, remember, I was living in the Mission. I liked burritos. So many years later, we're talking in the mid-'90s now, the reality was I was in Nebraska on a diversity program. And I'm Jewish. In Nebraska, that counts. When I was first there, I had this really detailed syllabus. I was trying to be cool. I had this I'm going to university, detailed syllabus of how I was going to do a parallel track of being Jewish and feeling out of place. And I had a play about my father who was in World War II and the Holocaust. And that was going to be an analogy for them moving from a small, very homogeneously, culturally homogeneous town in rural Nebraska to the university. It sounded cool. She read it, she laughed, she put it down. She said, okay, I just should tell you, some of your students are going to look for your horns and your tail. And I'm not joking. For a kid from Berkeley, that's like, I had to go back and get the reference. Oh, horns and tail, got it. It became a different thing. So one of the jobs that the Snow Clown now has is to take this play and perform for different classes at the university and then engender conversations. Who's been to Nebraska? Anyone been to Nebraska? Okay. You might have a sense of the skill of silence. And I'll just leave it at that. So we're going to pick up the scene right after he's done a pretty heavy piece from this play about his father. And I pick up the metal chair and sit down. The theater is silent. It's Monday morning. I'm on my third week here and determined to let the students talk first. A full minute passes. Another minute. Nebraskans are Olympians when it comes to silence. They win. This is a literature class, so I say, have any of you read A Short Woman in a Red Tracksuit Sporting a Blonde Bouffant Interrupts? Did your daddy really kill himself? I have learned enough to just answer the question. Yes. How old were you? I was 8. I'm sorry. Thanks. I let the silence sit, resisting the urge to talk about theater or literature. Eventually, the young woman says, my daddy died when I was 15. Cancer. He was sick a long time. I'm sorry about your father. Thanks. Your story made me think of him because he rode a motorcycle, an Indian. An old one, dark red with a leather seat. I miss him. I miss my dad too. A friend hands the young woman a tissue and we're quiet for a while. Eventually, a huge guy, who I assume is a lineman with the Cornhuskers, raises his hand, and when I nod to him, he says, my grandpa was in the war. His bass drawl is from the Deep South, World War II, infantry. He never talks about it, though. My dad didn't either. Then how'd you get the information for your play? My mom gave me some letters my dad wrote home from Germany, and I remembered some things from when I was a kid, like the motorcycle. I made up the rest. You can do that? Just make stuff up? Yes, you can. That's what an artist does, but it's dangerous. My brother hates this play. He said I got it wrong about the motorcycle, that Daddy was going to take us to Rochester, not to California. 30 minutes go by, the class is over, and no one leaves. We're talking about our families, we're talking about art, we're talking about pain, and we're laughing together. The theater feels small and cozy. Eventually, the students trickle out. I end up talking to the big lineman until we notice students coming in for the next class. Before he leaves, the big guy gives me a bear hug. Thank you, man. That was a great class. And I realized I took a quick jag in tone in that, and you felt it. It's one of the things that interests me a lot is sometimes you think, okay, that's comedy or that's dramatic comedy. But I find that life actually works like comedy for a while, and then all of a sudden you're deep in tragedy, and then someone makes a joke, and you've probably laughed at a funeral at some point, and it feels a little odd, but it probably is the right thing to do. So that connection interests me. If it's okay with you, I'd like to invite you to do one more conversation with the person next to you. And this is just I'm going to ask you to address one or two things that come from a methodology out of Stanford University. My friend Dan Klein introduced this to me. What they did is they did a study on what creates human community. And they would have done a good study here because a lot of you come to this regularly. You have a community, you've met each other. And what creates the really deep ties? And then they reverse engineered to figure out some simple questions people could ask to speed that process up. That's as much of the intro as I'm going to give. What I want to do is invite you to take a couple of minutes talking with the person who you were just talking to, and if maybe more than one, that's fine, and offer one or both of these: a story about your name, or a story of a teacher who has influenced you. A story about your name and a story about a teacher who has influenced you. And I'm just going to let you do that. We'll talk about it afterwards. So take a couple of minutes, either or both of those, have a discussion, go for it. Come on back together. Thank you. I was just saying, I feel a little guilty at that moment. Just as I see everyone's face lighting up and the room's really loud and bubbling, I go, no, look at me. I did notice the first time I asked you to talk to each other, in a way I'm just hearing the sound level, the decibels. It started a little quiet and then it went like this. This time it went boom, because you're starting to make that community. Who talked about name, your name? Okay, so the reverse engineering there was that, not surprisingly, sharing something about family creates closeness, and your name is often a shortcut to a lot about family. Who found out a lot about someone else's family? Just a quick thing about the name. Yeah, it's a nice way. So the teacher is personal, away from the family. So you find out something. Who did teacher or heard about? And raise your other hand if you got something interesting about that, who that person is about that teacher. Right? And there's the facts. Oh, they're a teacher who teaches ancient Lithuanian. Wow, that's a fact. Or, I love this teacher, they taught, I don't do that anymore, but the way they connected, so now you start to find out about it. That's a whole series, it's a whole activity called rapid bonding. And I take some of the themes that I've worked on in my life in the circus and theater world, and I use them in corporate settings. Yesterday I was in Dallas, Texas, very happy to catch the plane home last night. I did, here. And I was working with Deloitte, the big consulting company Deloitte, doing training with a lot of their partners on communication. The same things that work for professional clowns, it's the same thing. Mainly because the tools for clowning are techniques to be more authentic, which sounds like an oxymoron, but it's absolutely true. When you're standing up here, if, for example, I was standing here, I look different. If I was talking like this without any projection, the back row is going to start to hate me. So there's tools to make myself more myself with you, and that becomes an essence of clowning and performance. Those same tools, if you extend them to others, that is, to be able to listen and take in what they're offering, allows you to get into the kind of communications that you were just doing with each other, sharing stories. If it's only your story that's welcome, that can be lovely, but it's a different thing. I want to do one more reading. I want to take a few questions as well, if you have them. I warn you, this one gets a little tough. I know the last one did too, but this one, let me give you the setup. So the protagonist is in Nebraska, and he's been offered a week to work with a group of students to do a play that they're going to write and perform and rehearse in a week. And some of my theater friends are going, yeah. And the theme is, or we decided the theme was, going to celebrate Easter, Ramadan, and Passover all at once. So, first day, classroom, first meeting. And as I warn you, there's some language that's harsh here. Kike! Yes, good one. I write K-I-K-E up on the whiteboard under Hook Nose and Killer of Jesus. In the next column over, we've got Raghead and Terrorist, and the final column has Redneck and White Trash. Let's get some more. It's Monday morning, week 4 of my Nebraska tour, and I'm on a new project working with 7 students to write and perform a show that celebrates Easter, Passover, and Ramadan all at once. We have one performance Sunday night and a week to write and rehearse. We need the ugliest language, the words that have powered crusades and bombings and gas chambers. We need those words out in the open before we start looking for common ground. Most of the students are nodding, so I go on. We have to be honest with each other and ourselves about the power these words have over our thoughts and feelings. And then we have to forgive each other when we offend. Luckily, we're in Nebraska, so we know everything will stay polite. A couple of the small town kids make sarcastic remarks about Nebraska nice. No, nice is good. In San Francisco, for all of our tie-dyed grooviness, we like nothing better than a rip-roaring political fight, not helpful for what we're trying to do here. I point to our lists on the whiteboard. Our job is to politely talk about really nasty, gnarly, vicious ideas, tell each other some stories, write a play from these stories, and perform it on Sunday night. Easy. They smile, and we spend another hour on our lists, laughing at some words, getting very quiet when a slur hits home. After lunch, we start to teach each other different rituals. That scene comes from life, and the week after I built another play, this time with student teachers. I had a whole month to build the play, but I didn't have a theme, and I was reading the Daily Nebraskan, the student paper. My uncle and aunt lived in Nebraska, and so my uncle had a cafe, and I opened it up, and the front page said there was a cross burning at one of the fraternities. I said, oh, good, I got a theme. One of the guys who built the cross was in the cast. I didn't realize that until later. Head of the African American Student Union was there. Early on, I instituted this offensive tick. I said, okay, if you hear something that's offensive, just do that. And I'll let the conversation go on, and I'll come back to it and make sure we'll deal with that. But it was Nebraska. When someone made a really bad joke, to get the tension out, someone would tick, and I would get back to that. So at the end of the first week, it was Friday night, and I said, listen, folks, we're rehearsing on Friday night. I'm going to end a little early because I know you got parties to go to. I said, what? Do all students go to parties Friday night? Maybe we were planning on rehearsing Friday night. It was the perfect moment because it allowed me to have some humility. Thank you. That's exactly what we're talking about. Thank you. As soon as I could take that, then we started to go, and we actually created a play. It was a pretty tough play after that time. I want to take any questions you have in a moment. There's two offers. We're going to give away a couple of my books, The Secret Life of Clowns and Snow Clown. We also have them for sale over here. As I mentioned, I've been doing a lot of these kind of events and doing them in this, well, there's nothing like this setting. This is a lovely setting, but doing them in bookstores, the places you might expect, circus schools where you don't expect a reading, but it's fun. And starting to let that work move into some of the work I do with organizations. And I know there's a lot of people from different organizations. If you're interested in that, I'll be over there signing books, selling books at the end. Love to talk to you. I do have one last thing at the very end, but I want to take questions. What questions might you have about any of the things we've talked about? Yes? What do you do with organizations? The question is, what do I do with organizations? I tell them how to be better. No. The specific work is leadership and communication. So taking the ideas, I'd like to ask someone to leave right now. Thank you. See you. So taking the skills from the circus ring and the stage and translating it into what needs to happen in organizations. One-on-one conversations, which are the stuff of life. Meetings. How do you look at a meeting like a play rather than like torture? And how do you put that together? Even meetings on virtual platforms. Who has meetings on a virtual platform? Yeah, they can be great. They can be really harsh. So I've spent a lot of time. How do you translate an incredibly live thing, clowning, theater, onto that platform? And then leadership. How does that relate to how do you talk to a group of people and keep engagement and maybe even inspire, get some ideas moving? Did that answer enough? Yeah. The place I'm thinking of moving is some of these ideas we've been talking about, which are, I hear a lot in the breaks. We're taking a break and someone will come up to me and say, here's the real issue going on. And since that's what I was doing with students, that's what I've done a lot, might that work in an organizational setting? Yes?
How do you use clowning and communication as a tool for creativity?
How do I use clowning and communication as a tool for creativity? That throws me a little because I assume those are together. So I'm going to ask you, give me a little more help on the definition of creativity. What does it look and feel like?
I think of creativity as dot connecting and brainstorming and taking in your experiences and putting it together in different
To get to
some sort of solution.
some sort of, okay, thank you. So you are using creativity in an organizational sense where you actually need to solve something here. And yeah, thank you. So one of the things, I'm going to answer this in a pretty general way because that question, as you might imagine, we could go for a long time. In a general way, one of the things that I'm strongly committed to is that the body is part of communication at all times. You're communicating to yourself and to others with your body, and often that gets lost in certain brainstorming techniques. The body isn't there. So how can you embody the connection with other people? And that's the other theme, always going for the connection. How do you stay connected? I've thought a lot, actually I had a conversation earlier, of who do you include in the world of clowns? And there's all kinds of makeup, physical, and I've come down to if they're professional at connection. And I'll let anyone in my tribe, if that's what they got right there, professional connection. And so that's where I think, that's what, there's a lot of techniques around creativity in an organizational setting. Embodiment is where I would say I can offer some. Yeah, thank you. Yes?
Could you maybe briefly describe a moment on stage for you clowning when it was maybe a little more painful or embarrassing or...
You should see the big smile on her face. Mortifying? Just, you sucked?
Not that you sucked, but you realized, man, this is really hard work.
It's never happened. It's never happened. That's such an interesting thing. So there's a whole book on that. But the place my head went immediately was, so I celebrated my 50th birthday on tour with Cirque Du Soleil. I was older than my colleagues' parents because they were 22-year-old tattooed people with beautiful bodies. And I had seen the show. I was taking over someone else's role. Being immodest, I saw it and I said, I could do that better. Because you have to do that if you're a performer. And I did it, and I just didn't notice when I was watching that he had to fly on a bed 25 feet above the stage. It's pretty obvious, I just didn't put it together. I said, oh. So I'll tell you, the first show that I'm on this bed flying 25 feet the stage, and then they have a little, it's a gag, it's a funny thing. We tip forward to freak the clown out, and then we tip backwards to freak the clown out. And the tech crew are French-Canadian, it's Cirque Du Soleil, so they're speaking French, so if I scream, I better scream in French. And then one of the angels, who happened to be a young woman from the Russian gymnastics team, with a pretty nasty sense of humor, unclips me from my safety line, clips on this big line, and its little wings, and I'm an angel, because I'm a dead clown. And then I fly up, and then they drop it to about 3 feet on the stage, and I fly up again. It's all so funny. And then I go up into the top of the stage, and someone grabs me and pulls me up. It's the littlest guy on the team, named Fido. Hey, Jeff, okay, well, you're heavy. Yeah, Fido! I get up there, first show, and all of a sudden it goes black. It's dark, totally dark. And Fido goes, you better hold something. And I'm holding, and I'm there, petrified. This is 50 feet up at the top of a tent. And the whole computer system had failed, and it knocked the lights out. And it was 45 minutes of this. So after a while, Fido goes, well, you can climb down. So I climbed down in the dark, down this, and then walked back. That was not good. The coda was, it was a dress rehearsal, and the coda was, they said, well, we're going to go back to make sure the computers are right. We're going to go do that scene over again. So I got to do it twice, and yeah, I got to be mortified twice. But thank you for the question, so I can relive that. Let me get one, Brian in the back, yeah. No, we were having fun.
Tapping into your expertise as a teacher, I think something that clowning and a lot of the design practices have in common is the combination of technical skill, it's really tangible, and softer, like, what do you call that other thing? Can you talk a little bit about like your approach to training clowns with the balancing those two
things? We've known each other a long time, and I love that question. let me make sure there's many parts. The part that I think I can answer there in a short time is this idea of highly technical. You've got to have these skills, which often takes one mindset, and then highly interactive, highly intuitive at the same time. So that is a core issue in clowning. When I was running the Clown Conservatory, which I ran for 10 years, I had some students who would come in and go, hey, this is great because I don't like to rehearse. I just go out and I say, you're in the wrong place. Because we rehearse so much so that you can be 100% present. And I sometimes describe clowning. I used to do a lot of acrobatics and juggling, so there was really a lot of technical stuff. You get hurt if you're not technically. So you're 100% focused on the acrobatics so you stay alive. You're 100% focused on the audience to keep the connection. You're 100% focused on your body so that your character's working. You're 100% focused knowing where the lights are. That's a lot of hundreds. So that becomes the basic thing is in my mind is, well, two things. One, you better have your technique, keep working that technique so it continually gets deeper. You need it to be an acrobat who's being an acrobat. Takes a whole lot of work. If you want to do that same thing as a clown, you have to be better to do lower level tricks. Because it has to be connected. The other, my friend Tandy Beal, who's a dancer, circus director I've worked with for a long time, a brilliant teacher. She said, I used to teach okay, you're trained in acrobatics and then you'll come and you'll work clowning and eventually we'll put them together. That makes sense. She said, no, it doesn't. You do them together from the very beginning. You train them together. And I don't know how that works in design, but that is a new idea in the clown world, but one that I like exploring. So they don't separate out. Take one more question before I have a last thing. Okay, I'm going to go for the back. Sorry. Yes. Yeah, go. Could you stand up? Yeah. Could you stand up so we get the volume flying across everyone's head? Yeah.
How did you decide to become a clown?
How did I decide to become a clown? There's an assumption in there that I decided. No, but that's true. When I was 14, I learned to juggle, and I realized, first of all, my father was a physicist, my mother was a sociologist, my brother became a biostatistician. As you're the youngest in that family, you're searching for something that's not them. So what I did is I learned to juggle, and I could juggle right away, and I had this wonderful feeling like, oh man, this is me. This is great. And it was also something my brother couldn't do. Who are younger siblings? You all know. The older siblings going, I don't get it. But that's it. So I learned to juggle, but juggling was cool because people would watch you. And could you get that for a second? You could throw it. Thank you. Oh, beautiful. So people would watch you, and they would admire you. And as a 14-year-old boy, girls would admire you, and that was something really that had not happened before. But clowning was not. That was not cool. You put that stuff on your... No, I'm not me. And I had even seen... Has anyone seen the Marx Brothers Day at the Circus? There's a scene in that where they're on a train after hours, and the clown has his makeup on. And I was the little kid who made a lot of jokes, but I thought, he's got his makeup on the train at night. It's a tattoo. And I went through an existential crisis at about 8 saying I would never commit that much to tattoo my face with makeup. So clowning was off the radar. But Bill Irwin and Jeff Hoyle, Joan Mencken, these great clowns were cool, and it was more interesting. So then I got some gigs as a clown. That theme of needed to pay the rent comes in for a lot of choices. And then when you can start to take a skill and move it into something else, it becomes more interesting. So ooh, take that one for a second. Ah! Here, no, grab that one. Oh, it's coming in. Here, throw that one. Oh, you're the designated thrower. I see. You throw there, and you throw there. Good, keep going. Oh, look at this. Oh, it went the other way. Good. Oh, it's going. I see how this game goes. Oh, help me. It's right there. It's in your coffee. Yeah, good. Oh, thank you. Wait. Ah! Thank you. So one of the things that happens when you're a juggler is everybody in the world knows when you make a mistake. Dogs know. No, there's my ball. So there needs to be a mindset where when you make a mistake, instead of going, oh, you go, oh, now I can make a connection. And so that's what we're just doing. When it drops, we make a connection. You decided what the game was. And to answer your question, Brian, I needed the skill to be able, because you threw this way, and I was not ready for that. But having enough juggling skill, you can make her game play. And that becomes the theme. Can I make your ideas live large here? Can we make the connection? Thank you. It's been a pleasure.